Right. Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar, How to Build Local LLM Apps with Ollama and SingleStore for Maximum Security. My name is Yukti and I'll be your moderator today. One of my main jobs at SingleStore is to organize weekly AI webinars. We organize 2 to 3 webinars per week and we demonstrate different data and AI use cases. We also showcase different tools and technologies. And also I post about these upcoming webinars every week on my LinkedIn. So if any of these topics are interesting or relevant to you, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn so that you can stay on top of the loop. Also, our team would love to hear your feedback or any ideas or suggestions on topics that you would like to see in the future sessions. So please feel free to DM any of us via LinkedIn. We are open to all forms of feedback. Speaking of future sessions, we've got several amazing webinar sessions coming up. So you can RSVP to our upcoming webinars that are present on your screen right now on May 22nd. We have LLMs in fraud detection with an amazing expert who will be coming online. Then on May 29th, we have Supercharge Your MySQL apps 100x at scale with no code changes. Please scan the QR code and it will take you directly to the landing page. And on June 3rd, we have using open source Copilot for personalized banking applications. Very interesting for the people, those who are in fintech sector. So we also have a new feature that are coming up. You will notice that we have auto RSVP to our future AI webinars option on our website. So if you visit any of these landing pages, there's now actually a checkbox to auto register, which will add future upcoming Zooms automatically to your calendar. Obviously, you guys don't need to join each webinar live, but this is just an option for those who want to have the video assets or recordings, GitHub links afterwards the webinar. So please feel free to check it out. And coming back to today's topic, you are welcome to participate in the discussion throughout the session using the Zoom Q&A button. It's at the bottom of your console. And we also have an internal mission statement to try to answer 100% of the audience questions, even if that means following up with different folks afterwards via email. This has gotten a little difficult over time because we have thousands of registrations for every webinar. But we are absolutely up to the challenge and please ask away. Just make sure that you guys.
So there we go. So in terms of agenda, it's fairly straightforward. So I'll just do a couple of slides in terms of introduction, a little bit about the company and our high-level kind of architectural view of the product. Then we'll say very briefly some of the integrations that SingleStore supports, and then we'll kind of get into this area of RAG for maximum security. So there's a variety of ways that you can actually use SingleStore with RAG and LLMs, and we'll take a look at some of the options there. There's a couple of demos there, not very long, not particularly challenging, but the main thing is that they demonstrate local running of an LLM, which is probably the reason you're here, I would guess, or maybe one of the reasons you're here. All right, then. So please keep the Q&A coming, okay? And I'll do my best to help out with those when I finish. So we'll leave time for that. Okay, so briefly then, so we kind of standard slide that we like to show at the beginning, just to show a little bit about the company. So we are not a particularly, formed a couple of years ago kind of company. It's all the way back to 2011. So we've been around for quite some time now. And over that time, the revenue has risen significantly to the point now where it is $100 million US, over $100 million US in annual recurring revenue, ARR. And you can see that there was a kind of an inflection point there, roughly between maybe the first half of 2007, no, let's see, 2017, roughly middle of 2017, 2018, okay, when it started to grow significantly. And in terms of revenue, slight lag there, but the revenue, customers, my bad, there we go. Customers there, between 2019, 2020, we started to see significant rise in customers there, okay? So 350 plus global customers. I think I was asked the question recently, is that 350K plus? Not yet. Okay, so hopefully one day, maybe soon. I'm not sure. Depends. If the free tier takes off significantly, then I mean, lots of people have signed up for that. That could be one way. But along the bottom there, you can see the significant investors in the company as well. Okay, so these are very well-known names, many of them, and I'm sure you are sort of familiar with some of those. They actually use our technology as well to some degree, some of them. All right, then. Architecturally, very quick overview. So historically, the company and the product used to be called MemSQL, focusing very much on in-memory, OLTP. Subsequently added support for analytics and columnar storage, and then developed this concept of universal storage. Okay, so you have a single table type that can now manage both types of data, so both OLAP and OLTP. And we have integrations with a variety of technologies. And if you're a regular, you'll know that we've talked about Kafka in the recent past, for example. A few weeks back there, we talked about Spark and things like Hadoop, HDFS, which is actually one of the reasons that I got into big data a long time ago, was because at that time, Hadoop was the hot technology of the day. Now it's very much seen as a legacy technology. People want to move away from that. And so this thing here, the animation, is really showing the ability to take data from these sources and to be able to ingest them in parallel and at scale. Okay, this is a concept of pipelines, which again we've used a few times in the recent past, and is a fairly standard built-in technology with the product. Okay, so we run on the three major cloud platforms in the Western world: AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. And today I am going to be using AWS. Okay, you can run on-prem. And there is a 4-node licensed version that you can run free of charge. That is the full product. The only limitation is just the number of nodes. Okay, and I'll show you where to get the license for that momentarily. There's a Docker container as well. But I think the quickest and easiest way to utilize this is really just sign up for the cloud. It's, database service in the cloud. And essentially, if you've got a browser, you can work with it pretty much anywhere. All right, there we go. Stored type. So relational is where the technology came from in terms of its background. But over last couple of years that I've been here, I mean, I've covered articles and webinars that have shown geospatial, time series, for example, Lucene, full text search engine. JSON support has been there for quite some time, even better now with SingleStore Kai for MongoDB. And the interesting fact is that the product is both MySQL wire compatible and also MongoDB wire compatible. And vector support has been there for some time, even better this year with the addition of a dedicated vector type, as well as various indexing options, very well documented. Just to finish off then, this dashboards, ad hoc queries. Actually, I'll show you ad hoc queries in just a moment. Okay, so there's a built-in SQL editor in the cloud environment, and you can very quickly build visual dashboards, either if you use the notebooks, for example, if you're familiar with Matplotlib, Seaborn, Plotly, Plotly Express, or if you want to use the more kind of, in quotes, traditional approach, say, like Tableau or Metabase, as long as you've got some ability to connect through JDBC or ODBC, that's a great way to be able to build out visualizations very quickly. I use Metabase simply because it's just a jar file, it's a free download, and then you just need Java, and within a couple of minutes, you can be creating pie charts and so on. Okay, so the key thing here, and sometimes we get asked the question, because vectors is a popular topic today, naturally, with the growth in these large language models. So we occasionally get asked the question with these webinars, and as you know, I help out with the Q&A, is, what is the difference between SingleStore and, say, Pinecone or Weaviate or ChromaDB or Quadrant or so on? And the key difference is this, right? So we do all of this. We don't just focus on vectors. If you want to use SingleStore purely as a vector database, you can do that. And how good are we at doing vectors? Well, we are competitive in terms of performance. Eric Hansen's recent blog post that was published. More work is going on to publish benchmark results. I know it's the kind of thing people are interested in. That's on the way. And it is a very challenging thing to do. Many years ago, when I was an academic, I spent 6 years doing performance benchmarks for what was at that time the hot technology of the day, which was object-oriented databases. And it is very, very difficult. Finding a balance between the right workload and then the level of tuning that you can do and so on, and finding some kind of standard benchmarks that will represent, some workload. It is very, very difficult to do and very difficult to achieve. But, that's the nature of the world that we live in. Okay, more about this a little bit later. Okay, so very briefly then, just to show this, to kind of emphasize the point I was trying to make just previously, that let's say you've got an environment where you're using a variety of different applications. Maybe you are working with batch data, and perhaps you are using something like MySQL for that. And perhaps in time, you may add some kind of operational requirement and still using MySQL. Over time, perhaps you've got the need to manage things like JSON data, for example, that might be coming from outside your environment, maybe some partner that you are dealing with, and they are sending that data in that format. Or perhaps you need some caching, okay? Redis often I've come across in the literature and in case studies, it acts as a sort of cache sitting in front of MySQL to speed up performance. That's a possibility. Or maybe you want to do things like full text search, maybe something like Elasticsearch, or perhaps you want to use streaming data, and then maybe even things like analytics, data warehouse, something like Snowflake. You can see very quickly that now you end up with a variety of different technologies. So you got MySQL here, you got Redis here, for example, Snowflake, Elastic. And so when working across these different requirements, SingleStore can act as your single repository and work with all of these, managing this concept of database sprawl, as you can see in the title in this slide. That's helpful to you as a developer, makes your lives easier because now you don't have to learn half a dozen different products. It's also good for you as a business user because it saves you money. So you lower your total cost of ownership by having just one product, and you improve upon your return on investment. Okay. And we do have examples of customers that have gone through that process, by the way, several different products, and they've replaced them with SingleStore. Very briefly here, we've covered a number of ways that you can work with AI and machine learning with SingleStore. This list is not exhaustive, but these are some of the tools that I've worked with. So I've demonstrated the use of Spark, for example, very easy to do. Python, naturally, okay, because it seems to be the most popular of the languages today, especially if you want to do data science and machine learning. Although I have to say, I do like R. I have used that in the past as well. And in the recent past, I've written some articles on that. That's also extremely powerful and still very, very liked and supported. A great community around that. Vector functions. By default, SingleStore comes with two distance mechanisms to measure distance. One is Euclidean distance. The other one is dot product. So to detect similarity. Things like cosine similarity you can code, okay? It's very easy to do. And if you have something a bit more exotic and you can access the code or you can write it yourself, another method that you can extend the system is through this code engine using WebAssembly. So essentially write your code in say Rust or C++ or C, package that up, upload that into the database system. It sits in its own environment. It is protected. If there's a bug, it won't crash your database engine, but now you have the ability to extend the capability of the database engine ad infinitum. And I think we've had this recently. I saw there was a customer that was interested in some other distance measurement or some other way to ascertain whether things were close or far apart. Rather than using dot product and Euclidean distance, they wanted to write it themselves. You can do that using WebAssembly. Okay, that's perfectly possible. And then, of course, working with the LLMs, of which OpenAI is just one example. Okay, so let's get on to the detail then. So typically for LLM applications, we have this very broad and high level kind of architecture and view in terms of flow. So there is some end user. They have some requirements, something that they want to be able to ask of the system. Typically, we build some kind of application. This requires us to be able to do this search and retrieval. We create these vector embeddings, okay, and you can do that using SingleStore, and then you augment that with some kind of large language model in terms of the prompt, and we'll see an example of that today as well. Very straightforward. Broadly speaking, you'll find plenty of articles in the literature, published around this kind of concept, and then specifically many LLMs focusing now on sort of multimodal capability, the ability to handle vision and speech, and improving performance, lowering cost. So especially for the commercial vendors now, you will find that it is very reasonable in terms of the costs and in terms of the tokens that you need and how much you are paying them. That works quite well now. I think a little while back, I assessed when I did a webinar not so long ago versus the same thing that I ran about a year ago, and I think the cost was about 10%. So it had gone down significantly versus what it was previously. So very, very cost effective to be able to do that. However, there are cases and situations where you may be dealing with private data, and you want to keep that data private, and you want to have control of that within your own environment. And you don't want to send that out across the wire to some third party sitting out there in the cloud for them to evaluate it for you, using their APIs, and then they send the results back to you. In general, my understanding is that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, okay? So please do post in the chat if I'm wrong on this. But my understanding is, and what I've read, is that these commercial LLM providers do not keep your data unless you give them specific permission to do so. So that at least gives you, some level of confidence that your data is not being retained. However, a lot of the questions that we see on these webinars, people are very worried and concerned still about privacy and security. They want the ability to control their own data. And so I think with some of these cloud providers in particular, for example, you see that there is this ability to use kind of like private link. You can create these private clouds, you can utilize these environments. And as an example, if you look at Bedrock, for example, from Amazon, they have a number of different models that you can access, and they give you the ability to have fine control over that, and as well as the environment that you run in. And so if you want to utilize, say, something like SingleStore within that environment, well, we are in the marketplace there as well. So it is possible to run entirely within the AWS platform if you want to do so. So that's one thing to think about, okay? Typically then you may, use some of these vendors, as I said before, they have arrangements with these cloud providers, or they offer something themselves. So you can utilize a commercial LLM with some level of confidence and privacy and security and so on. Equally, you might decide to go around the open source route. Okay, possibility. Something else that I mentioned a while back, and again, this is a question that's come up in the recent past, is, will SingleStore offer the ability to run ML and Gen AI models locally within our own compute environment? And the answer is here. Yes, we're thinking about it, and we are working on it. It is an active area of development, as well as support for GPU. In fact, that might even be live today. Okay, the CPU stuff has been around there for a while in terms of our notebook environment. So that gives you another possibility. And I think going forward, increasingly, you'll see vendors adopting this approach as well. Either they'll develop the LLM themselves, or they'll come to some agreement with third parties, if they are commercial, or if there are open source options available. And then so specifically for SingleStore, we are looking at Ollama. Okay, that is one of the options that we are considering. And for you as a developer, what that means then is that you have the choice of a number of models that you can utilize. It's all within the same environment. It's not something that you have to worry about because it's contained within that same environment behind your firewall, for example, and behind the compute resources that SingleStore provides. There is no need to go outside of that. Now, earlier today, someone asked me this question, and they were saying, well, you're now running this database in the cloud still. How is that giving you the ability to limit access? Well, if you think about it, database systems running in the cloud have been there for quite some time. All of the major cloud providers provide it. And if you look at just a simple case of AWS, they have numerous database products that they've been providing within the cloud environment. And the ability to access them securely, the data are secure. There are even sort of government level and military grade kind of clouds if you want to go down that route to that point. So that's, I think, much less of a concern, much less of an issue. I think the real concern is around the LLMs themselves and where these are actually run, what you pay for in terms of an external service, and can you bring that in-house? Can you bring that under your control more? And so something like this will give you that option. Another possibility is to run something in some kind of hybrid mode, like here, for example. So part of this architecture you can see is actually running on-prem, and part of it is running in the cloud. And there is this kind of CDC and Kafka being used here as a means to be able to replicate data from one to the other. And so that could be a useful way to build your system. So I'm just, sorry, looking for my box. There we go. So here in this particular scenario, you can envisage that if you are particularly working with a large language model, maybe you would consider actually hosting it within your own self-managed environment, wherever SingleStore is running, for example. Okay, so that's a possibility, this kind of hybrid approach. And so if we look at the options, we can see that, okay, we've tended to do this, okay, remote, and we've tended to do this here, remote. And lots of the examples that I've built in the recent past have kind of been down here. So I've utilized things like OpenAI a lot for many of my demonstrations and examples. And I'm running SingleStore in the cloud. That's fine. That works really well. I don't need to have anything installed or running locally on my machine, or if I had a large server farm or something like that, or I was working in a corporate environment, that is not something that I would have to worry about. I mean, it's using these external mechanisms. But maybe there is some concern, as I said before, about the ability to have more control over your environment. And so seems to me that we really need to start looking into this here, and all of these options provide potential. Okay, so like I said, I'm less worried about the fact that this is remote, simply because it's tried and tested, well known, lots of possibilities there to control the environment. The hybrid gives you a good kind of middle road as well. And the fact that you can run SingleStore locally is another option that is, making things very simple as well. It's everything is behind your firewall in your own environment. Okay, so let's get to the demos then, and just keep an eye on the time. It's 6:27. Okay, and so before we go in there, just very briefly then, why did I pick Ollama? Well, Ollama has gained quite a little bit of sort of fandom. It's come up very quickly. It's become quite popular. You will see it mentioned very frequently in the literature. Vendors are starting to look at it seriously. And by vendors, I mean vector database vendors as well. So it gives you the ability to do local LLM deployment. So you can run your LLMs like Llama 3, for example, on any of these major platforms, Mac OS, Linux, Windows, and the ability to use things like GPU acceleration as well. Today, I'm going to be using a virtual machine, and it's going to be running Ubuntu. Okay, so that's my environment. There's a wide range of models supported. Okay, it's on GitHub as well, and you can read the details and the documentation. So things like Llama 3, for example, Mistral, and so on. And so you've got a choice of different LLMs to test out. And if you find that one is superior for your particular problem, that's great. I mean, you have the opportunity now to pick and choose whatever is most appropriate for your problem. And the other thing is that now, because you're running this entirely within your own environment, you've got a lot more control as well, customization and integration as well. So with LangChain and Llama Index as two sort of the frameworks that you could use, I'm going to use LangChain today, and I'm not going to use LangChain today. Okay, so I'll show you two examples of that. So that's very, very useful. Okay, the steps that I followed for setting up my environment are this. Don't worry, please don't try and take a screenshot or write this down. Yukti will share the links to the blog posts and the Jupyter notebooks, okay? So you'll be able to see what's needed. But what I wanted to just simply show you here is how easy it is to do. So in my case, I'm using a virtual machine, okay? All I needed to do from my SingleStore cloud environment, because I opted for that option rather than trying to run SingleStore locally, simply because of some resource constraints that I have. I'm already giving the virtual machine half the memory and CPUs to run, and it's barely able to cope. So it's not a good idea for me to try to run a database system in that environment as well. So all I needed to do is just get the password and the host name. Okay. What I've done is I've created a database in the cloud. Just call it Ollama demo. I didn't have Jupyter installed, so I just needed to do that. This is the classic Jupyter. And then at the bottom there, you can see I'm just running it. And then the main thing is just this. It's a one-liner just to install Ollama. And there are similar sort of commands if you want to do it on the Mac. I think you can use Homebrew as well. And for Windows, just create and set this up. And I've set up an environment variable as well, which points to my SingleStore instance. Okay, just below here. Let me just show you that. Okay, this thing here. So the details of the password go here. The host goes here. And as you can see, the database name is at the end there. Okay, so that's just set up. So within the Jupyter notebook, you see that there's no information there in terms of connectivity. It's simply because I've defined this SingleStore DB underscore URL variable within my environment, and it just picks that up. So LangChain will happily work with that and be able to utilize all of the services that I need of it. Okay, so let's now switch. So I'll just minimize this a moment. Okay, bear with me, and let me just pull up my virtual machine. Okay, actually, I think what I may do is just pull this across to one side, like so. Okay. Anyway, let's just get this opened. Okay, and then I'll just make the window a little bit bigger here. And like so. Okay, there we go. And let's take a look here. Just make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so this is running Ubuntu, and I've previously run that command just to install Ollama locally. Very straightforward. I have the classic Jupyter installed as well, and I'm just going to power that up. Okay, there we go. And then we'll just walk through the steps. So let me show you, utilizing LangChain, how short the code is. There we go. Okay, so you can see I ran this a little while ago. So the easiest thing to do is we can just clear this. All right, and then just see if I can make this a bit bigger here. There we go. Should do it. Okay. So we'll just install LangChain and Ollama there. There we go. A couple of libraries that we need to use. Whoops, just got a little bit too far. There we are. Let me just run that. And then fortunately, you can run the Ollama commands from the terminal if you wish. But because it now can be sort of run from here, it makes life a little bit easier simply to say, okay, I want to use this one, which is mini LM for creating the embeddings, and I'm going to use Llama 2 here for the actual LLM. Okay, so let me just get this one. So that's quite small. First one is only 45 megabytes. So you can see here, status success. That's very fast. And this one takes a little bit longer, slightly bigger, 3.8 gigabytes. So whilst it's doing that, a word of caution. It is very tempting and very easy to download all of these models. Be careful. Some of them are very large. You'll be sitting there waiting a long time for some of these to download. Be choosy in terms of what you obtain. Okay, do your research, do your homework. If you have access to a very fast internet and you have access to a large sort of quantity of memory to be able to run some of these larger models, by all means think about that. That is worth doing. If you're going to evaluate them yourselves, then of course you need to go through that process. You can see there it took a couple of seconds there for that to download. And then here, again, standard RAG approach, very, very straightforward. You can take this example and you can extend it to your needs. But all we are doing here is simply taking some text, what are essentially 6 lines. We can treat them as documents here. There are different descriptions of what llamas are. We simply create the embeddings just below here using the mini LM. Okay. That I think uses 300 and is it 64 dimensions? I'll be able to check that in just a moment. And then we simply find the length of the dimensions here so that we can pass this information to LangChain so that when it creates the table in SingleStore, it does it using the vector type. And then finally, we just convert the documents to the format that SingleStore needs. Okay, and we just run that. There we go. It's very fast. And then just below here, this is the magic. And again, a question that I've seen very often is people are kind of saying, what's the benefit of using LangChain? I could write this in 10 lines of code. Well, the magic is really here. You can see that it's actually very, very compact, extremely useful in terms of all the information that you need to be able to run this. We are providing the details of the document. We are providing the embeddings. We are telling it what's the table name that we want to store it in. What is the distance strategy that we want to use? By default, it will be .product, but we choose to use Euclidean distance here. We can also create a vector index, and we pass that dimensions information here as well on the last line in order to create the appropriate length for the vector type. Okay, so if I run this, it's fairly fast. I mean, there's a very small quantity of data, as you can see, so it doesn't actually take very long. But now I'm connecting securely to SingleStore. I've stored that data, but everything else is running locally here. And then again, standard RAG, prompt, what animals are llamas related to? Just ask the question, we convert that using the mini LM again, and it returns an answer to us. So llamas are members of the camelid family, meaning they're pretty closely related to vicuñas and camels. And then that answer we can take and feed into the LLM itself, all right? Down at the bottom here. All right, now, a word of caution. This takes some time. So a word of warning. You may be sitting there twiddling your thumbs and wondering, when is it going to finish? I told you, the downside that I have in terms of running this locally is that the virtual machine is consuming half the resources of my machine. It's not ideal, but it works. Eventually, I'll get back an answer, okay? But I do have to wait a little bit of time for that answer to be generated. In your cases, as I said before, if you have access to larger resources behind the firewall within your organizations, or maybe if you're doing this at home, you have a larger server with memory, GPU support, for example, lots of CPUs and so on, and storage as well, then you'll find that this is much, a viable solution, a much better solution in terms of working with these large language models. Because through Ollama, we can access many of these open source or freely available models. And some of these are actually on a par or, perhaps sometimes surpass what's available commercially. This is a viable solution. So again, everything is contained within my environment. I'm not sending anything outside of this. to be evaluated by, there we go, there's the answer. So it took a little bit of time, as you can see, to get the answer back, but now it's given me a response and given me quite a detailed explanation of what vicunias, camels, and so on are, and then a summary at the bottom there as well. So LangChain here does a really good job. It helps to consolidate and really, you know, in terms of the plumbing and the management, it does a really great job. So it saves a lot of time. Ollama allows me to download the appropriate models that I need, and again, you can run this on the command line. Okay, there's some command line options that you can execute to actually do the pull rather than doing it through the notebook as I've done here. And you can see that, you know, that is not very long in terms of the quantity of data that I'm working with, or the fact that I had to do very much in terms of working with these both the embeddings and the LLM itself. All right, let me just quickly show you the alternative, just as a means to demonstrate the benefit that LangChain brings to this. Okay, so similar sort of setup. Okay, just run this. And this. Okay, now you see that I've done this previously. So again, we'll just get that mini LM and then just pull this Llama 2. Just stay where you are. There you go. Okay, bear with me. There we go. That's done. And here you can see much the same setup and environment, same set of documents, but a little bit more work required here in terms of creating the embeddings and then building up a pandas data frame, which we're going to write to the database. So a bit more work here. Okay, that's doable for this scale of problem. That's not bad. We simply provide the connection details to SingleStore here. And then I've got to start writing some SQL code in order to create the table, which I'm doing here. Now, I'm not the best SQL developer in the world. I make mistakes. And sometimes, you know, when you've got these kind of statements, it's very easy to put a typo, you know, here and there. Something goes wrong. But that seems to have worked this time. So it's created the table for me. And what I'm essentially trying to do is to replicate everything that LangChain did for me. And I'm using this vector type here. Okay, and again, I found the number of dimensions as well that we need. Okay, and then finally here, we just take that pandas data frame to SQL as a very efficient way to be able to write this data directly into the database system. And then we have to create the index here. Okay, Euclidean distance. That's done. And then finally, exactly the same prompt in terms of the question, what animals are llamas related to. Now, again, you can see there's a lot more involved here in terms of the SQL statement here that I have to create. The fact that I'm using this infix notation here, okay, which gives me Euclidean distance. I've got to create the connection details here. I've got to get the result back. I've got to print that out. And if I do this here, oops, there you go. It seems to be an error. Did I forget to run something? I forgot to run something here. Let's just run this again. Let's try that. Okay, and if it fails, we can take a look. All right, let's have a look. What's the error? JSON array by embedding. Multiple vector indexes are available. Okay, so what's happened is that I've tried to run this several times. Okay, the index. What I need to do is to drop the index and then to run this again. Okay, so I'll show you this in a moment. But essentially, you can see the output just below here. It's exactly the same. Take that prompt, and we ask the same question, slightly formatted in a different way there, but more or less the same information that we saw with the LangChain response. All right, now let me show you what I've got on this side here. Okay, so let's switch back to the SingleStore environment. Let's just make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, so if I use this Ollama demo, I can show the tables here. So within this environment, you can see that I have the one that was created by LangChain docs. That was for the LangChain example. And then below it, the pandas docs. You can see what I've got is I can describe what has LangChain actually created for me. Okay, so this is what it's done behind the scenes for me. It's given me a unique identifier, which happens to be a big int. I've got something to store the context, which is there's a long text here. There's the vector type, okay? And there you can see, so I was off. I said 386, it's 384. Okay, that's what mini-LM generates. It uses 384 dimensions in terms of the vector space. 32-bit floating point. You can change that, okay? You can use other types as well. And there is some metadata being stored as well in terms of JSON as well. And we can take a look at the, let's have a look. Take a look at this one. Okay, so this is the other table. So this was the one that I provided the details to and created by hand, having to, attempting to mirror what LangChain had done for me. And if we take a look at this index, you can see here, can you see that the error that you saw in the notebook is because I've already ran this previously. So I didn't clear this out. So I've got one vector index here. I've got another one and another one. And because they are using the same name, it's not allowing me to utilize that. And it's complaining that you've already got several vector indexes, all the same name. So what I need to do is either recreate this table or just drop these indexes, and I should be able to save the data again. All right, there we go. So let's take a look here. Just to summarize what we've seen then. Okay, so with the ability to run the LLM locally, what I can do is reduce the risk of unauthorized access or data breaches. You saw it's entirely within my environment. It's cost effective. You don't have to pay anyone any subscription fees or any kind of usage-based billing. That's great, save money. Faster inference times, reduced latency. Well, yes and no. I mean, my environment is not ideal, but if you have the necessary resources, you should be able to find that running it locally is going to be a lot faster for you. And because you're simply not having to send things across the wire, there's no need to communicate with remote servers. If you are building particularly real-time applications, and again, hosting this within your own environment, the response should be a lot faster. And the ability to customize and fine tune as well. You can change your hardware configuration. There's all sorts of things that you can do in terms of controlling your environment, which you don't have control over if you are working with an external source, such as one of these sort of commercial LLM providers. Okay, so any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Okay, my favorite quote from Arthur C. Clarke. So none of this is particularly magical. All of this is very straightforward, as you saw. The fact that I think you can run these large language models locally, of which Ollama is a great example today. Perhaps in the future, we'll see more vendors entering the market, many more open source solutions. But it gives you a kind of a foot in the door, if you like, a way to evaluate it, to try it out, to test it out, to see if it's useful for your application domain, particularly if you are concerned about security, privacy, maintaining the data within your own environment, creating these embeddings, using these LLMs within your own environment. I think this is a great way forward and gives you a chance to do so. Increasingly, I think you'll see that particularly vector database vendors will be starting to offer these abilities as well within their environment. As I mentioned earlier, SingleStore is looking at this. Okay, so watch this space. We'll be hopefully able to offer something in that space in the very near future. Okay, there we go. So today I finished a little bit early. Okay, Yukti, time for questions, please.
Hi, this was really amazing, and we actually have a lot of questions for you, Akmal.
Oh,
And
okay.
thank you so much for
Normally I'm
yeah,
answering.
thank you so much. It was really amazing. We have so I'll just choose one of the questions. So, guys, before we take up any of the questions, just a reminder that the Q&A button is at the bottom of your console, and like, please send in any other questions that you guys might have, and we'll follow up with each of you guys via email. So please don't worry if we are not able to get to your questions in the best interest of time. So I'll start with one question
Yeah.
from Gani. He says, how does it make a difference for Mongo Atlas latest changes where it supports all mentioned on the right side? I think he's referring to some of your slides. Uh, do you want to answer this question, or do you want to like take it up later on?
Could you, repeat the question, please, Yukti? I'm not quite sure I understand.
Yes, very correct.
It's something about Mongo,
Yes.
Mongo Atlas.
How does it make a difference after Mongo Atlas latest changes? And
Okay. Right. Latest changes. Okay, forgive me. Okay, perhaps I'm a little bit ignorant there. I'm assuming that this may relate to some ability to store embeddings, run perhaps LLM capabilities in their cloud environment. If that's the case, I'm not familiar with it at the moment. I do know that Mongo Atlas offers this ability to utilize embeddings. They create that as part of that, and you can store it within the database. I think there's an example I came across not so long ago. But the with SingleStore Kai that SingleStore has offered, which went to GA earlier this year and has been in development for a little while, at least a year that I'm aware of, we essentially try to provide as much compatibility with Mongo as possible. So certainly as far as the API is concerned, things like indexes, all of those capabilities will be supported by Kai. Obviously, there are peculiarities to Mongo itself in terms of the underlying architecture, its storage, and so on, which wouldn't make sense for us to support. What we're essentially trying to do is that if you have built an application using MongoDB and its APIs and indexes and things like that, JSON and so on, you can very easily move them across to SingleStore. And why would you do this? Well, performance for analytics. And we've got benchmarks that demonstrate this. And again, Yukti, I think we can point to the benchmark blogs that we have, which show in some cases sort of 800, maybe even up to 1,000x performance improvement for some queries. Okay. And across the board, typically you're looking at least tens of times faster, sometimes a few hundred times faster. But the extreme case of 800 to 1,000 in one or two cases that I'm aware of. I hope that
okay,
answered the question. If not, we can follow up
yeah,
later.
very, very clear. I think we have one general question actually. It's
Yeah.
from Robert Henriksen. He says it's actually a very important question. What is the specs of your current MacBook machine that you are running this on?
Terrible. I need a new machine. I've got a very old Intel machine, all right? So it's not even using Apple's own sort of processors. And so this is a 16-inch, and I've got 16 gigabytes of memory, of which half I've given to my virtual machine. It does have a GPU, but I don't think the GPU is utilized in my VM. Now, you might, and to follow on from what Robert's asking, why not just install Ollama and all of that in the MacBook? Why do it through a virtual machine? The simple reason is that I need a stable environment in order to do my work. In the past, I've found that if I start tinkering with my production, the machine that I use for my day-to-day work, very soon it gets bloated, very soon it stops working, and very soon I can't do anything. Hence the use of a virtual machine, which really does a pretty good job. I can just wind it back to a known state if I make a mistake, or if there's something that I wish I hadn't installed, just roll it back to a checkpoint, and that works really well.
Sounds good. We have one question from Wendy. She says, how is Ollama different from Hugging Face, which also provides models that can be run locally?
Okay, yes, that's a good question. So I think in this particular case, what I like about Ollama is its ability to really, effectively, it's a piece of software running by itself. once I've downloaded the model, that's it. That's all I need to do. I don't need to access anything else. I hear the argument about Hugging Face, and I know Hugging Face, and actually I'm going to be looking at Hugging Face in the webinar in a couple of days' time, where we're going to look at the financial fraud, and we're going to look at Finbert, for example, which I'm going to get from Hugging Face. I'm also going to be using GPT-2 from Hugging Face. So I kind of see the argument. It's a question of personal taste. I just happen to like Ollama simply because it's easy to install, easy to use. It's got a nice kind of web interface there as well, as you saw. You're able to use it directly from Jupyter. Very straightforward. It's integrated as well with LangChain. Yep, I know Hugging Face and others, there is the ability to use various frameworks as well. But I think in my particular case, I thought that this is something that I haven't come across before. Hugging Face has been around for some time, but it seems to me Ollama provides an alternative. It provides another choice, another option. Some people may find this better than using Hugging Face. I don't feel that one solution is necessarily better than another. It's a case of choose the tool that's the best for the job. Sometimes it may be one, sometimes it may be another. And again, it's a question of what your circumstances are, what your environment is, what you can and cannot use and install within that environment. But this to me seems like a good choice for now.
All right, moving forward to the next question. We have one more question from Gani. He says, for production, how does pricing make a difference when self-hosting the LLM and using the service? For startups, should we not be concerned and use the service? Because hosting cost is also high compared to using the service. So
Okay.
just to like frame it up for you, how does pricing make a difference when we are self-hosting an LLM?
Okay. Is this in relation to SingleStore? I
I
assume
think,
it is.
yeah,
If
yeah.
you're going to self-host a SingleStore, it's really up to you. You can run a 4-node version free of charge if you have the resources internally. And I know, when I worked in industry in the distant past, some of the early IT jobs that I held, we typically saw large sort of server rooms, where these machines were running all the time. And you typically install software on those and database systems and so on, and make these generally available to other people. You have database administrators and system managers and so on. And those environments, to some extent, have largely gone away in many corporates because the cloud has become so reliable and cost effective. And I can vouch for that as well. I mean, that gives you a great option. But I think there are instances where it's very important for some organization to have full control over the data and to be able to manage that all themselves and to have everything run within their own environment. We have customers, for example, at SingleStore that do that simply because they do not wish to run things in the cloud. They have certain there's rules, regulations, and things that they must follow as well, and simply company policy. But my guess is that if you want to self-host it, you could do so in the cloud. That's possible. Remember, we talked about some options in the slides that you can certainly do that if you wish to do so. There's no need for you to just install something behind your own firewall, but you could do it in a secure environment in the cloud if you wish to do so. That might be a very cost-effective approach. Longer term, in terms of the LLM stuff, I came across an article that in a couple of years' time, we'll be using more electricity for AI than France uses in a year or something. And the ozone layer is going to get destroyed, and the world is going to come to an end. And so hard to predict. Definitely, the amount of resources that we seem to be using for AI now, it's growing exponentially. And I think in the future, it's kind of difficult to predict how we're going to meet all these challenges and requirements to maintain both the environment and the kind of things that we want to build in industry. But I think that self-hosting is a viable option, very cost-effective option. In this particular case, because you are also self-hosting your LLMs as well, then that gives you, again, full control. There are pluses and minuses, I think, and trade-offs, and you have to think about this. Look at the numbers, do your costings, do your tests, evaluate the alternatives, find the one that works well for you.
All right, that actually answered the question really well. So moving on, we can take two more questions, I think. So we have one question, like I'll just make it very short for you. Like, do we have any documentation or or any comparison of single store between face or quadrant?
Right, great question. So we do have one with one of the open source databases, and that was the article by Eric Hansen Yukti. I don't know if you remember. I think we've been asked this question before. So
Yes.
that is taking a current open source framework, a benchmark framework, testing it against that very same product. And then we came out quite competitively on that. There is additional internal benchmarking that's being done, I know. And again, we have, I think, blog posts that are in the pipeline that will be published hopefully in the near future. I would say that if you are looking at SingleStore seriously for vector and you are perhaps evaluating other vector database systems at the well, come and talk to us, okay? Because the thing is that, like I said before, benchmark, and I spent 6 years doing benchmarks a long time ago, and it was very frustrating, very challenging. Lots of things can go wrong. Lots of things that you need to consider about the architecture of each product to make sure that you are getting the best performance for each product according to how you want to query and what sort of results you're looking for. And these considerations can only be done, I think, generally with the help of vendors, because they will be experts in their technology. So by all means, approach us, talk to us. Okay, team@singlestore.com. We'll be happy to assist you. And I would recommend that if you are, for example, evaluating Quadrant, you go and talk to Quadrant as well to get their assistance and their support and their help too. That will ensure that you do a balanced and fair comparison between the two technologies.
All right. I think we are almost at the top of the hour, guys. If you have unanswered questions, we will follow up with everyone via email. I have put hello@singlestore.com. You can get in touch with our team regarding any of these questions, and we'll be happy to assist you guys. So, all right. Thank you so much, Akmal. This was really amazing. What a informative session, guys. We have amazing webinars that are coming up on May 22nd. I think Akmal only is hosting this webinar, LLMs in Fraud Detection.
Yeah.
So if you like today's webinar, please join the webinar on May 22nd as well. And we will talk about how LLMs are integrated when it comes to fraud detections. On May 29th, we have Supercharger MySQL apps with 100x at scale with no code changes. And on June 3rd, we have using open source Copilot Kit for personalized banking applications. Please sign up for any of these topics if these are interesting to you. So moving forward, the announcement that everyone's been waiting for. Today's raffle winner goes to Michael Calamil. He's the head of data at YSL, which is a designer brand. Congratulations and thank you so
All
much for
right.
joining. And guys, if this is not you, please do not give up. We are also going to announce one more AirPods or a Meta Ray-Bans winner by the end of the day. For anyone who has tried out today's demo along with Akmal's webinar and signed up for the raffle link, which was there in the chat and is also on your screen, you guys will be eligible and be entered to win. Thank you so much, Akmal, for today's presentation and demo. And guys, thank you so much for joining. We really value your time and energy, and please reach out to any one of us in case of any questions or any follow-up or any feedback. All right, I think we are done. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.